Hello, welcome to Nightmare Flicks. I am Nate. You are you, and this is day 6. This is stop 6 of the road to Halloween Kills. And today we're doing a double up. Every other video we looked at one film at a time, talked about the pros, the cons, the backstory, some fun facts, all of that. So why are we tackling 2 films today? Well, because I think these films actually share a bit of an odd relationship to one another. I feel like they're kind of tied to one another, and that they cause some conundrum, some debate in that H20, Halloween H20, it is very beloved by critics. And I think the overarching consensus, the critical consensus, is that it's one of the best films in the franchise and that it definitely trumps Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. And that film was actually panned, and it gets a lot of vitriol and hatred for being a complete mess of a film, whether you're looking at the theatrical or the producer's cut. So that seems to be the opinion of most general moviegoers, the more general audiences that only come to Halloween occasionally or maybe around the Halloween holiday. But for those dyed in the wool, the Halloween horror heads, the people who are on YouTube talking and getting paid to talk about Halloween almost every week, people like Dave McCrae, the guys over at Wham, Lee from Drum Dums, they all have the opposite opinion. They're kind of coming at it with an inverse look, to where they actually look at like Dave McCrae, his franchise rankings. He has H2O here and then H6 a spot above it. The guys over at Wham, they really talk up H6. That's one of their favorites. I think that's one of their top 3 or top 4. H2O does not fare very well in their rankings. They don't think it gets a lot right about a Halloween film. And then you look at Lee over at Drum Dums. He loves H6 so much that he actually expelled all this effort, time, energy to put his own cut. He made his own cut of the film to where it marries the theatrical and the producer's cut. That is a lot of TLC. That is a lot of time and investment. So clearly he's a big fan of that film, and he has a lot of disdain for H2O. So that's a little bit of an interesting situation that we're seeing here play out, to where critics, people who get paid to talk about movies, will tell you H2O is the better Halloween film. But the actual community seems to be telling you that no, H2O may be a better film, but when you're talking about a Halloween film, and that being the key word, Halloween, that H6 gets way more correct about it and is a way more true to the feeling of Halloween type of film. So today we're actually going to look at it and discuss, based on 5 different points I think are most key to a Halloween film, which is the better Halloween film. So we're going to be looking at stuff like atmosphere. We're going to be looking at the portrayal of Michael Myers. We're going to be looking at our good guys, the pro tags. We're going to be looking at atmosphere. We're going to be looking at kills. We're going to be talking about plot, all these things. I think I said atmosphere twice. But that's what we'll be looking at, because those are the things you most need in a Halloween film. We look at Halloween 1978 through the score of John Carpenter, through the portrayal of Michael Myers via Nick Castle, through all of those very likable characters, and Laurie Strode, Annie Brackett, Linda, so on and so forth, Dr. Loomis. You get an ensemble cast that you really care about, so you're invested when there's a chase scene, when somebody gets killed. It's very memorable, and it feels like a payoff. It feels like a proper fitting to the slow boil that we've been sitting through and all this rising tension. And of course, it feels very autumnal. It feels like a chilly, crisp October night in Haddonfield, Illinois. So you need all these different elements. You need fun kills that you're going to remember. You need good, genuine scares. I think you got to bring all these things together and just mix them all up into the proper concoction, and that will give you a good Halloween film. So which movie does that better? Is it H2O? Is it Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers? Be sure to submit your answer down below in the comment section. And then go ahead and hit subscribe if you're new to the channel, because we do all sorts of fun horror content, Halloween content all year long. We got a lot of it coming your way in honor of Halloween Kills. Can't wait to review that one. Can't wait to do a franchise ranking. But let's go ahead and talk about these 2 right here. Let's make them square off. Let's make them go head to head. Let's get a good old-fashioned movie fight for Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, and Halloween H2O. So the reason I think these movies are kind of divisive is that what one movie does well, the other does poorly. And what one movie over here, what H2O is excelling at, it's the pitfalls of H6 and vice versa. And so it makes sense that what one likes about it, someone else probably hates. And that's, of course, film is subjective. But if we're looking at these on the grounds of a Halloween film, and we have this little rubric like I've suggested to you with atmosphere, Michael Myers, protagonist, kills, story, I think you'll look at H6 and see that it really nails atmosphere. It really nails scary. It really nails Michael Myers. And it has a lot of really fun, over-the-top, grisly, amazing slasher kills. However, it's a little bit weak when it comes to like character and plot. So of course it makes sense to me then that critics would not prefer that film, because critics are going to come to it looking at narrative, looking at character development, looking at character arcs, looking at resolution and climax, things of that sort. And you don't really get that with H6. You don't get a nice cohesive story. Things that are interesting in the first just get dropped by the third act. For example, when we open up, seems like there's something supernatural going on with Danny. The man in black doesn't need to be physically in front of him to talk to him. He's kind of channeling him. He's pressuring him to do evil. And the way that likely transpired with Michael Myers as a child, and that's transpired with Jamie Lloyd. So that's interesting. You think that we're going to see something, there might be some sort of payoff, but come Act 3, it just completely gets left on the cutting room floor and nothing really happens with that. There's no point in even including it in the beginning. And really, the movie's script fails a lot of the characters, so we don't get really interesting protagonists. Whereas with H2O, we see the culmination of everything happening with Laurie Strode. We get Jamie Lee Curtis back 20 years later, reprising the role, and she's phenomenal in it. She brings so much gravitas to the role, and it's her best acting maybe any film in the franchise, and fans really love what happens there. And then you see this narrative to where she finally gets closure. She gets to lop the head off her brother, Michael Myers. Fantastic conclusion, fantastic resolution, something to really make you pump your fist, go home and get you talking, that type of thing. Don't really know that it happens with H6. There's a lot of great atmosphere through H6. It feels like you are in Haddonfield, Illinois. And, you can't say that about H2O because it's not set in Haddonfield, Illinois, but it doesn't feel like October anyway because it's set in this like California boarding school, this private institute, and it feels very summery. It feels a bit too polished. It doesn't feel like a Halloween film for that reason. And then you're pumping in all these Scream music cues because this is made by Dimension, who just went gangbusters at the box office with Scream. So they're trying to reiterate that and recapture the magic of Scream. They're trying to borrow from it like everyone else was at the time. And you don't do that. It hamstrings your film. It no longer feels like Halloween. You have one of the best scores of all time given to you by what John Carpenter did when crafted. You can adjust it, you can do some tweaks, but you don't need to borrow music from Scream because that works for Scream. This isn't Scream. We need to have the actual classical score. You can adjust it for modern times. That's what H6 does. They make it a little bit more 90s. They give it a little bit of a hard rock edge to it, but it works and it enhances the atmosphere. Whereas here, we're really hampering our atmosphere. So the edge and atmosphere definitely goes to H6 for the way that it feels like autumn. It feels like Haddonfield. It feels like October. This feels like a very classic horror setting in the way that they use darkness and contrast and the flickering candlelight and all of this and that. And they have these really ominous settings and you have this cult stuff going on in the background. It feels creepy. It feels brooding. It feels menacing. And therefore, of course, atmosphere has to go to Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. And of course, Michael Myers is better in H6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Of course, you need a proper shape. You need a really good, menacing, terrifying boogeyman. Don't really know that you get that with H2O. Chris Duran is not bad. He catches a lot of shit from the horror community, but he's really not that bad when you look at what he does. His walk is not too far off from Nick Castle. Some of his gestures, mannerisms, they are on point. He's really doing his best to recapture the essence. You can tell that he did some studying. Whereas with H6, as scary as Michael is, there is a little bit of continuity here because he's portrayed by two different people. I believe it was Michael Lerner and George P. Wilbur portraying the shape in H6. So sometimes he's kind of tall and slender. Other times he's sort of short and stout, which is a bit odd. I prefer what Michael Lerner does in the film. But all in all, you still have to give the edge to the H6 Michael because not only is he menacing and scary in the way that he's shot, but his mask is far better. In H2O, we're using multiple masks. One of them's okay. It feels a little bit like the 7-8 mask, but another one is this bug-eyed batshit mask. One looks a little bit alien and has these super round, crazy eyes. And then one is a CGI mask. You cannot do a CGI mask on Michael Myers. This is the most recognizable, iconic mask in horror, if you ask me. So then you cannot do a digital effect. That's like sacrilege. You cannot do that. It is a cardinal sin. So of course I'm going to defer to the H6 mask, but even on its own accord, that's a pretty damn solid mask. It's one of the best masks in the franchise. I do have a few problems with it. It does look like the latex or the product is a little bit too thick and there are some lumps, but the hair is nice. There's a nice little bit of menace kind of tied into the mask where they adjusted the features to make it a little bit more scary, a little bit more creepy, a little bit more mean-spirited. And I do like that. I think it shoots well and I think it looks wonderful on the camera. And then of course he's out there doing things like massacring everybody in the lab. That sequence was so bloody, so grisly, so mean that they were actually told that they had to cut it down. And they had to edit out stuff, and they had to do the strobe light effect, or else they were going to NC-17. So that tells you that when it comes to things like a scary Michael Myers, and it comes to things like kills, that H6 does it better. Now, The kills thing, you could give an edge to H2O if you are all about being true to the original idea. Because originally, Mustafa Kha, John Carpenter, they didn't want a very bloody film. They didn't want one of those slash them up, hack them up, blood and guts thrown all over the place. It was about, subtle creepiness, a subtle effect. That was about tension and a slow boil to make you unnerved. Not so much about just throwing blood into your face. H6, it kind of goes that route, but it feels like it's updated. It feels like a film of modernity. But with H2O, you don't get a lot of that. I mean, you get the leg gore with the girl who is in the dumbwaiter and she's dragging it, and that's actually done very, very nicely. That's done really well. It looks realistic. It's gnarly, it's gross in the best way. But other than that, most of the time, pretty bloodless film. And in that way, it's done much like the original, in that you're finding people who have been killed and their bodies have been staged by Michael in creative ways, just like he did with Annie's body in the first film, and he puts Judith Meyer's tombstone behind her. So that feels true to it. So I actually won't rule either way on that. I would call that a wash. It all comes down to taste. Like, do you prefer more outlandish, crazy kills, like an abusive dickhead stepfather's head being exploded in a way that makes no sort of logical sense? Do you prefer that? Or do you prefer more type of subtle kills or nods to the original? That really just comes down to what you prefer. I think both are good. But ultimately, Michael Myers himself is better in H6. He looks better, he looks way more scary, and he's doing way more in that film. So at this point, it really sounds like I'm saying H6 is the better film. But I gotta say, the next two areas, when we look at narrative and plot and script writing, and we look at character arcs and characters themselves, our protagonists, I think those things count the most. Because, like I said, when you look at Halloween, it's not just about hacking them up and slashing them up. It's not just about boobs and blood like some other slasher films are. It's about narrative. It's about characters you care about. And it's about payoff. It's about slow boiling tension. It's about scene building. It's about atmosphere. It's about all these different things. And I think H2O does so much to recapture that and to be a true send up to Halloween 1978 and Halloween 2. This feels like the natural progression for that story, even though it comes 20 years after the first film. And it ties it up in a nice little bow. It has a satisfactory conclusion. And along the way, we get these characters that are multifaceted and they have a dynamic amongst them and they bounce off one another in really interesting ways. And they all have all their own motivations that make sense and they never leave them. Nothing is forgotten. Nothing that is set up in Act 1 gets completely forgotten and abandoned in Act 3. We get fantastic acting. I mentioned Jamie Lee Curtis and what she does in this film. Josh Hartnett and Michelle Williams give you something a cut above what you would get in other slasher horror fare, where you usually get kind of unknown actors that you never see again or you only see in, B-level horror movies. No, these are bona fide stars who are really giving you great performances, even if they have small parts. And then you get somebody like LL Cool J, and you can balk at that. You could think you're going to end up with something terrible having a rapper in your movie. Of course, we saw that play out with Halloween Resurrection and Busta Rhymes, but LL Cool J is kind of bringing it. He's a good actor. If you have any problems with what he does in this film, it might be his dialogue where, he's this kind of hacky romance novelist and he's talking about, succulent, round, melon breast and all that. But you might also get a kick out of that. You might think that's funny. But everything else he does, he makes good acting choices and he feels real. He feels authentic. And I like the way that he plays off of Josh Hartnett. I like the way that he interacts with Jamie Lee Curtis and Arkin. So that's what I'm saying. The characters, story, it is all there in H2O. And if you wanted to come up with a timeline, H6 is coming off of H5, and it was handed a bag of dog shit that is on fire. They were never going to win. But Daniel Farrens actually did come up with a pretty good script, a script that Dr. Loomis himself, Donald Pleasance, was a big proponent of and got him excited, wanting to come back. And then, of course, they would rewrite over that script 11 times, and we'd get all this studio involvement. The Weinsteins would just really hamper what was going to happen with this film. You had a director that didn't even like Halloween films, so he was taking things out and shooting stuff without telling anybody. And the result was just this story that doesn't work. And that's what I'm saying. They had so many problems to solve coming off of 5, where, people were just injecting things into that film with no idea where to go with it. And that those problems had to be solved and had to be solved quick and on the fly. So, of course, it was always going to be an issue. And that's why we have the reset of H2O. But I think that goes to show you that at the end of the day, the story of H2O is just way more compelling, way more true to the original, way more satisfying. And that's why so many people prefer the timeline of Halloween 1, Halloween 2, Halloween H2O. There we go. In, out, in 3 films. Nice little trilogy. And it's everything I need. Whereas with H6, you get a conclusion to the Thorn trilogy that has nice elements. So I understand when people go, that's the best film. That's one of the better films because it's scary and it has atmosphere and it has wonderful kills and Michael is terrifying. And that's what I want from a Halloween film. I get that. But that's not necessarily all Halloween 1978 was. I think the elements that are being forsaken are some of the most important elements. I think H2O presents those to you. And so even though I hate the CGI masks, I hate that they use a bunch of different masks and all this, and I don't like that it's not in Illinois, it makes all the sense in the world to the narrative and to the character of Laurie Strode that she would not have resided in Haddonfield any longer. That she would have, kind of went into like a witness protection mode, changed her name, picked herself up, and raised her kid elsewhere to try to do whatever she could to prevent Michael from ever getting to her. That makes all the sense in the world, so I'm okay with it. I can set that aside, even if it does have a little bit too much polish. It feels a little too Dawson's Creek, feels a little bit too much Scream. It still feels like a very good film, and it has a satisfying conclusion, and I love so much about the ride there. Well, with H6, there's a lot of stuff that makes me pump my fist, and I go, yeah, and that's awesome. Get him, Michael. Where are we going with this? Cool. Oh, we're going here. Why are we going here? This doesn't make sense. Well, what about this? What about that? What about this? And so no matter how much I want to love H6, and I do, I got the hat right here. I think if we're all being honest with ourselves, the superior film is Halloween H2O. And the superior Halloween film is Halloween H2O. When you look at all the things that go into a Halloween film, at least I hope I presented the argument in a way that you feel that is, indefensible, that is true, that is a valid point when you look at the tenets of Halloween. When you look at character, you look at the shape, you look at atmosphere, you look at scares and kills, and you look at a narrative. I think when you do all of those things and you consider all of these elements and these points, that H2O is without a doubt the superior film, even though it's a lot of fun to be a part of the cult following of H6. And there's a lot to enjoy about that film. It is highly rewatchable and it's fun to talk about because it's so fun to talk about because it has so many issues. So there you go. There are my thoughts on the two films. Be sure to let me know yours. If you like this video, then hey, like this video. It helped me out a lot. And be sure to subscribe so you catch all the fun Halloween content coming your way. Cannot wait for Halloween Kills. I hope you have a fantastic day. I'm Nate from Nate Flicks saying that's a wrap.